Their deadline was our lesson. The ultimatum clock burned in the corner of every screen, a white numerals wound like a fuse. 2 hours and change spelled out in hard edges. Admiral Mara Kepler stood at the forward rail of Flag Bridge 1, feeling the faint vibration under her boots as heat pumps cycled and the fleet exhaled through radiator vanes. The Orthis Council had broadcast their doctrine to every civilian band in Andalveld: surrender the convoy and its humanitarian corps, or the corridor would be swept clean, ships, life pods, beacons, nothing left but static. The council called it merciful clarity. Mara called it arithmetic with a blindfold. Ultimatum reads 2 hours, 6 minutes, said Commander Imani Rowe from the EW nest. Her hands hovered over a ribbon of controls, knuckles reflecting console glare. They seeded 6 decoy markers into civilian channels, Admiral. They want panic to do half their work. The fleet-mind Vesper answered with a voice that carried a strange calm. The markers are designed to cluster civilian motion. Herding behavior makes their interception cheaper. They are efficient and wrong. Show me the siege ring, Mara said. Ion Trace painted a thin jaundice on her tongue as coolant flowed through the circulation vents. A lattice of hostile cruisers hung at half a light hour bright at the corners where their radiators bloomed. The corridor itself, a swept volume between 2 gravity shoals, held 27 cargo hulls, 4 hospital barges, and 1 old tug that looked like a dented kettle. On the forward rail, Mara tightened her gloves until the seals kissed skin. Convoy to fleet, she keyed. This is Admiral Kepler. You're not alone in that corridor. We'll buy your way home. Anchor 6 reads, you came, a thin voice through compression. We're holding at drift, Admiral. Engines are hot, but every time we push, they paint us. Mara tasted metal. The Council's doctrine was always the same: make a visible clock sharpen fear, then offer a single door. If the door was taken, the Council tallied a bloodless win. If not, they taught a lesson with beams. We will teach without killing where we can. The first vignette found her anyway, bright and human through static. A child's laugh clipped on a cargo channel, followed by a woman hushing softly. In the bow of the hospital barge, Mercy's wake nurse Etta Hollis checked the seals on a supply crate and looked at her gloved fingers as if they were not quite hers. The hull ticked as micrometeors' grains pecked paint. On a sling near the bulkhead, a boy mouthed a song with the solemn focus of the fevered. Beside him, an old man watched the countdown reflect in a stainless steel kettle. A deckhand kept rubbing his thumb against a coin, then caught Etta watching and tucked the coin away like a sin. Do you think they'll fire when it hits 0? He asked. Etta didn't answer at first. She leaned nearer to listen to the boy's breathing. I think we'll move before then, she said. On Flag Bridge 1. Mara rolled her shoulders once and felt the fabric of the suit drag at the back of her neck. Vesper aligned the mirror web, she said. I want the decoys ghosting on their sensor horizon in 9 minutes. Compute will be close, Vesper said, a cool fan under every syllable. But we can thread it. XO. Mara turned. Lieutenant Commander Rourke Chen's jaw had the set of a man holding a line against a drifting anchor. Navigation's laid out 2 misread corridors, he said, both plausible under their grav fit. The third is a sacrificial seam. We hide our barrel roll there, Imani Mara said, and the EW officer lifted her chin. When we open, flood them with reflections. But not the same reflection. Give each captain a private certainty. Imani's smile was thin. Make them argue about what is true. A pleasure. Learn them so they cannot ignore themselves. The council spoke again. The ultimatum numbers pressed on the eyes, 015712. Prefect Thane's voice had the sanded patience of a teacher who had stopped believing in questions. Human convoy, acknowledge compliance. Our doctrine is merciful. Delay multiplies harm. We have accounted for your habit of heroic gestures. Mara angled her head to the side. Open public ban, she said. Prefect Thane, this is Admiral Kepler of the Commonwealth Task Group. We do not accept your ledger. You are counting lives you do not own. We will escort the convoy. Your escort is visible, Admiral Thane replied. So is your heat. I advise surrender of the hospital barges now. This preserves children. Your choice can be kind. Your doctrine pretends there's only one door, Mara said. We build more. Rourke eyed the wall map. They're repositioning to meet options we haven't offered, he murmured. Confident. Mara breathed in. Air tasted faintly of warm plastic and the ghost of ozone. That's the problem with confidence, she said. It only teaches when it's wrong. Hold the line long enough to open a better one. As the fleet readied the mirror web, the sensory noise of 100 ships settled into a single living hum. The radiator fields unscrolled like pale wings. Heat budgets ticked and rations of coolant were assigned by quiet algorithms. We'll run warm, Vesper warned, but survivable if the web holds. It has to, Mara said. We're not building a victory. We're building a path. At the crew tables of the frigate, Gray Circlet Petty Officer Morrow cut a ration bar in half and slid one portion across to her bunkmate. Her hands shook as if a motor in her wrists had worn an eccentric weight. You can eat the whole, the bunkmate said. Morrow smiled with half her mouth. If I eat it all, I'll forget I'm sharing a sky with strangers, she said. I want to remember that we're carrying people, not numbers. Over her shoulder, coolant hissed through a valve line, and a mechanic bled air with the lilt of a lullaby, as if the ship could be soothed into kinder math. Mirror web spooling, Imani announced. 1,800 foils distribution across the dust field. Phase noise seeded. Their range gates will sing out false harmonics like a choir drunk on glass. On your mark, Rourke said. Mara looked at the ultimatum digits now, woe 1, 49, 38, and lifted her hand. Mark. The first throw was gentle. Foil blooms unfolded like lily pads in a night pond, each coated with a microfilm tuned to catch certain wavelengths and spit them back with the faintest warble. At range, the web became a ghost corridor full of plausible ships. Imani added a sprinkling of exhaust sense ion traces, measured and mimicked a perfume for predators. Reflect them back until they see what they've drawn. Targets multiply. Vesper reported in her ear. Thane's net commanders request authority to close the aperture early to avoid budget escalation. Budget Rourke snorted, incredulous. They're counting shots against a doctrine schedule. They call it stewardship, Vesper said. They prize it because it feels like care. Mara watched the council ships pivot a few degrees like a door, almost closing. Imani cut a small hole where the tug can see it, she said. No bigger than a grin. The old tug's captain, a woman with tattoos like sardine scales up her neck, saw that grin and pushed her throttle until thrust shook her teeth. She did not run for herself. The tug had 8 kids packed under blankets and a crate of saline like a cathedral. On Mercy's wake, Nurse Hollis felt the hull pulse as the barge nosed into the faint. The boy in the sling breathed in and held. The old man closed one eye and sighted the countdown through the kettle's handle like a gun sight, then laughed once without humor. They're making them look at themselves, he said. That's new. Count nothing you aren't willing to carry. The council's first volley painted brilliance across the dust field. 2 shots found nothing. 3 found foil ghosts. 1 kissed the tug's bow plating and left scorched like a handprint. Minor damage, Vesper said. No hull breach. Heat scars only. Report it, Mara said to everyone. Rourke tilted his head. Broadcast our own damage. Let them see the cost on our side, Mara said. Truth is ballast. A quiet voice chimed from comms. Anchor 6 reports a burn. No casualties. The captain says her kettle still sings. Mara's mouth made a shape that almost became a smile, and did not quite. All ships, she said loud enough to carry through the frame. Hold your nerve. We will not trade lives we can save. Open what they've sworn to close, then hold it. Vesper unfolded a schematic with light. We can break the siege with a barrel roll, she said. Rotate the convoy around its own thermal wake, then swap signatures with the web. But the roll will expose the Mercy's wake for 18 seconds. 18 seconds, Imani echoed, tasting the number as if to see if it would dissolve. Can we brace that gap? Rourke asked. We can, Mara said with a teach. She rolled the word in her mouth until it warmed. Prefect Thane, she said on the open band. You have told the system that Mercy is efficient. Watch with care. Admiral Thane replied, patient. You are building accidents. Correction, Mara said. We are building mirrors. The fleet moved like a flock, deciding mid-flight to become a river. The convoy's motion was gentle but decisive. 1,000 small thrusters pushing against vacuum until everything came together like a sigh. Heat shimmers danced. Sensors reported ghosts. For 18 seconds, Mercy's wake lay bare. Imani lifted her finger and pressed a single control. On the Council scope, Mercy's wake became 3 potential targets, each nested within a different error envelope. The shot that followed scored the void 6 kilometers off the barge's port quarter and burned nothing but old light. Mirror their doctrine until it cannot stand. The ultimatum clock rolled to 01:38:11. The Council made a choice visible in motion alone. They tightened the ring, but not to fire. They tightened to save fuel. In their math, time could be bought where lives could not, and that belief showed in the way their radiators flared and cooled like gills. Teach noted, Vesper murmured. They economize when belief is steady. Press belief. Mara took a breath that smelled faintly of warm rubber. Imani bleed truth, she said. Leak their captain channel argument about budgets to public bands. No edits, only echoes. Imani's hands moved. A second later, the convoy heard snippets of Council voices, disagreeing about whether to fire early to conserve coil faith. They call it coil faith because the coils last longer when no one is afraid to pull the trigger. Imani said dry. Superstition in math's clothing. Rourke's eyes shone with a harder light. They teach by scarcity. Let's teach by surplus. Not waste, Mara said. Better gifts. We'll lend them a door. Hold out a hand even while you guard your throat. The second vignette arrived with the scent of reused air and heat stink from overtaxed pumps. In the belly of the cargo ship, Pollock's Gate, a group of dock hands gathered around a crate of ration bricks, trading jokes like coins. A woman named Sarah drew a chalk line down the deck and told the youngest to stand on the soft patch. When he asked why, she said, "Because if the hull knows you, it will carry you longer." A mechanic cracked his knuckles like hail on tin. The hull ticked again, patient. The boy asked, "What if they still shoot us?" Sarah looked up as if she might see through metal by wanting it. "Then someone taught the wrong lesson too many times," she said. "But there are other teachers here." On the flag bridge, the ship-wide speakers hissed for a moment as coolant mixed in a new ratio. Vesper's tone deepened by a shade. "Their next escalation comes when the timer reads 1 hour, she said. "I propose we flip the corridor 10 minutes before that." "Inside out," Rourke asked, eyebrows lifting. "Turn their kill box into a hollow," Vesper said. "Then show it to them with their own lights." Mara felt the tiny thrum of fuel pumps like a heartbeat under her boots. "We'll need the mirror lattice at double density," she said. "We'll need the convoy to trust their deck more than their eyes." "We can teach trust," Imani said like a promise. "Some doors open only when many hands push." The Council began to broadcast small warnings in a tone meant to soothe. "Do not attempt to run," Prefect Thane said. "Admiral Kepler is clever and will get you killed. Choose the path that preserves the most lives." Mara answered on the same frequency. "I agree with the aim," she said. "We differ on method. We will not lay down people like markers on your table." Admiral Thane said, "You mistake doctrine for cruelty. We have measured what works. When the numbers are poor, we suffer them and keep the rule. That is mercy." You don't suffer, Mara said softly. You only count. She let that hang on the line not as accusation, but as invitation. Say the word that makes them look twice. Rourke pinged navigation, his voice a quick metronome. On my cue roll, the convoy 20 degrees starboard, then yaw 5. Keep your heat low as prayer. Prayer absorbed came a dry reply from the tug's captain. Heat like a whispered sin. The barrel roll began again deeper. Imani's web brightened. Vesper threaded the fleet's radiators through shadow so that heat bled like a slow bruise rather than a flare. On council scopes, the corridor became a question. Which door was real? Which exit saved compliant doctrine? Which risk preserved coil faith? Prefect 1 council captain said on the leak, Imani kept open. If we close now, we fire in blind. If we wait, we burn our confidence. Both costs are visible. Thane let silence be the first answer. Then we will not punish the obedient for the disobedient's tricks. Hold. Balance requires weighing both sides, not just your own. The convoy's leading ships slipped through a seam that hadn't existed a moment before. The tug passed second, the Mercy's wake third. 2 cargo hulks scraped a little heat at the edges, and their paint bubbled in blisters the size of a thumb. Minor damage, Vesper said. Twin ships, cosmetic and smell. Report the smell, Mara said, her mouth tugging. Let it be real. Hot paint plastic and pride, Imani said. I'll put that into the log. Put it into the log, Mara repeated, and felt something in her chest settle like a tool set into its slot. A voice from the convoy from a tiny shop aboard a cargo hull that doubled as a grocer. Admiral, the grocer said, my hatch light is flickering. Is that fear or physics? Rourke answered without looking up. Both, he said. But the switch still works. Brace the frame and the heart follows. The countdown ticked to 01:12:03 when the first real escalation hit. The council stopped speaking about Mercy and started to close sonar quietly, as if noise itself might admit uncertainty. 3 ships extended spines and opened their coil throats. They intend to fire a field that disables engines but leaves life support, Vesper said. On paper, a tender blow. In practice, Mara asked. In practice, drift is death if the corridor collapses, Vesper said. Especially for barges. We won't let them drift, Mara said. Imani sing them the wrong hymn. Rourke prepared to open the inside-out corridor. Rourke's thumbs pressed and lifted like birds. Ready. Imani fed the council a priest's share of false comfort. She painted a phantom cluster of engines burning on a trajectory that would bait their disabling field into a hollow. The field went out like a veil. Now, Mara said, the trap flipped. What had been an open mouth became a hollow lung. The council's disabling field pooled where no ships were. Then Vesper turned the fleet's pulse beacons outward and illuminated the empty space with their signature. On every public band, that emptiness shone. Make them see the cost they meant to hide. The leak carried a low murmur of consternation from the council net. They used our mercy to empty our hand, a captain said. We look like butchers planning grace. Thane's reply came crisp. We do not look like butchers. We refuse panic. Hold the rule. Prefect Mara said on open band, your rule forgot to count the fear you induce. The fear turns every efficiency into a wound. We are showing you the wound. Admiral Thane said, calm, bending toward iron. You are eloquent. Eloquence is a luxury people die under. At 60 minutes, we close the corridor completely. Then we have 51 minutes to teach, Mara said. Open your hands wider than your war. In the hangar of the corvette, Attestation Crew Chief Del Rios checked the mag clamps on 2 lifeboats and kicked a panel until the lock decided to accept being a lock. The air smelled like heated oil and old coffee. If we take heat, she told her crew, we drop these within 5 breaths, then we go get them back. No drama, no speeches. A young spacer raised a hand. Chief, he said, what if their rule says we can't get them back? She adjusted his collar with 2 fingers, and a fondness she would deny. "Then we break that line like it was drawn in chalk," she said. "We don't ask chalk for permission to be rain." On the flag bridge, Vesper floated a hollow of fuel budgets. "We can keep radiators extended at this rate for 18 more minutes before I advise contraction to avoid heat stroke on the spine decks." "Understood," Mara said. "We'll pulse them. Show sweat, but not fever." "Sweat is persuasive," Imani said. "People believe struggle. They mistrust polish." "Then let them see us work," Mara said. Rourke broadcast the coil whine from our oldest frigate, the one that sounds like a cello with a cracked heart. Rourke grinned despite himself. "Aye, count with your ears as well as your eyes." The council moved to their hour mark as if it were a sacrament. At Owanoro Prefect Thane's voice filled the corridor. "The window is closed. Firing schedule begins. The merciful path is now expired." Mara let a breath out through her nose. "Vesper," she said, voice soft enough that only the ship and fate heard. "Set the ledger." Our own Vesper asked. "Yes," Mara said. "Numbers we will carry." The fleet mind paused, and Mara imagined the minds within her unwinding like string from a spool. "Ledger set," Vesper said. "We will teach by numbers and remember by ledgers, never by collars." "Good," Mara said. "Now open the inside-out corridor again, and make it loud." The hollow bloomed, and this time the fleet framed it with their own broadcast of coolant hiss suit, heartbeats, the staccato of radiator vents, the scrape of boots on a ladder. The corridor wasn't only light and math, it was the sound of people doing their jobs. Let them hear what they claim they protect. 3 council shots lashed out. One glanced a cargo hull and left a black kiss the size of a handspan. Another bit an unmanned foil and tore it into glitter. The third came in too hot and too sure, and the heat fringe at its edge touched the corner of Mercy's Wake's 4th deck. "Report," Mara said. "Hull scorch," Vesper answered. "Deck 4. One nurse has a superficial burn on the forearm from a hot rail." She swore and then laughed. "Name the nurse," Mara said. "Etta Hollis," Vesper said. "Log it," Mara said. "And tell her good laugh. Keep the account human or it's just scars." Rourke spoke around a mouth askew with urgency. "Admiral, they're shifting to a tight phalanx near the corridor's far mouth. They intend to make a public point at the exit. If we pass under their eyes. We pass under our own first," Mara said. "Our point is not that we can slip past their gaze. Our point is that their gaze is not the measure of what's right." Imani flashed a map. "We can use their public point against them," she said. "If we broadcast their prepared speech and lay it next to their private budget talk, we turn the end of their corridor into a mirror." Mara nodded. "Do it, and prepare the second teach." "What's the second?" Rourke asked. "We let them shoot at something they cannot justify," Mara said. "Not a ship, a number. Sometimes the wall you break is a measure." Vesper pulsed the web. A decoy formed not of foil but of math, a bright tally on the scopes annotated with the Council's own doctrine lines. It represented acceptable harm in coil cycles and human hours. Imani painted it with the Council font and made it pulse like a heart. "They'll fire at it," Rourke said, voice tight with something like hope. "Because it looks like defiance." "They'll fire at it," Mara said, "because it looks like truth." The coil discharge went off like a summer storm behind a thin wall. The tally shattered. On every public band, the number broke into smaller numbers, each labeled with something that had started as an abstraction and now read like a wound, beds lost, days of fever nights with lights dimmed to save heat. In the silence that followed, Mara could hear her own ship's pumps working stalwart and unglamorous. Reflect their shot until they see what it hit. The leap through the corridor's far seam would demand one more swell of heat. Vesper warned of the cost. 2 minutes of open radiator at near red, she said. Spine decks will feel it. Crew will smell the metal sing. Spine decks can sing with it, Mara said. We can pay that. It's a cost with meaning. At the gray table, in Gray Circlet's wardroom, Petty Officer Morao placed her half of the ration bar back onto the plate and pushed it to the center so anyone passing could take a bite. Heat shimmered along the bulkhead like summer over tarmac. "We'll sweep after," she told the mechanic. "Even if we're tired. I want the ship clean when the people come aboard." "What people?" he asked. "The ones who'll need a ride," she said simply. "After we make the council choose. Open the door and name the room." The council had one more argument left, and Thane made it with the weariness of a man pushing a boulder up a hill he had chosen. "Admiral Kepler," he said, "you disassemble clarity into noise. That is crueler than any beam. Clarity that demands a singular door is a trap," Mara said. "Noise is not the opposite of truth. Sometimes it is the chorus that makes a listener question the solo." "Your metaphors kill," Thane replied. "Your math kills," Mara said, and softened her tone for the last sentence she gave him before they ran. "Let us both count again. Reckoning is a gift when it arrives in time." The fleet rolled hard through the last seam. Radiators flared until their edges went the shade of old cherries. Heat sensors barked. A junior tech swore at a stuck lever and then kicked it with love, and it moved. The convoy followed their shadows long on the dust. Imani kept the mirror web singing now, a lullaby, now a bright overtone. Rourke adjusted vectors as if he were playing a game where every move could break a friend's heart and save it in the same breath. 2 cargo hulls took small scratches, and their pilots laughed into their masks like people surprised by relief. The tug's captain cried once, a sound like a rope pulled too tight, and then wiped her eyes with her wrist. Mercy's wake passed under the eyes of the council phalanx, their scopes painted with the image of the tally they had shattered. "Prefect," one of Thane's captains said on the leak, voice cracked now in a human way. "We are being watched by those we claim to shelter. If we fire, they see what we fire at." Thane did not answer at once. The ultimatum clock kept moving, but its dominance had faded. It was only a number now, not a sermon. "Hold," he said finally, he said. Sometimes mercy is not a rule but a throat cleared. Vesper's heat graph dipped as radiators folded a notch. Crew on spine decks touched hot rails and shook their hands and sucked air. "We can afford a minute's cool," Vesper said. "Then we must pulse again." "Pulse again," Mara said. "Give the ribs a breath." A murmur rose from the convoy channels that sounded like gratitude, trying to find the language to be large enough. Nurse Hollis' voice, steady, told the boy that he had weathered the worst. The boy said, "What is weather?" And Hollis laughed softly. "It's what we move through," she said. "It doesn't get to be us. Anchor your measurements in lives, not in threats." The plan-changing escalation arrived like a nail in silk. A new council wing arrived on Dark Vector, running cool until the last minute. They carried a different doctrine. No clocks, no announcements, only closure. "We didn't factor them," Rourke said, swallowing. "Independent contractors, maybe. For the prefect's plausible deniability." Vesper took an extra beat before answering. "They radiate no council IFF. Their coils are clipped for quick bursts. They will strike the convoy's tail to make an example," Imani Mara said, even as her throat went tight. "Sour their coils. I can choke their recharging schedule," Imani said. "But not for long. 30 seconds at best. After that, the web becomes noise and they'll shoot through." 30 seconds is a lifetime," Mara said. "We need to turn their arrival into a mirror for Thane. If he watches them, he must choose to own them or disavow them. Either way, his doctrine cracks." "Open channel," Rourke asked. "Open it so wide the static has room to breathe," Mara said. "Split the difference only to show there is none." The dark wing came in, angling for the tail of the convoy. Imani's souring hit, and their coils hesitated like a thought caught on its own thorn. "Now," Mara said, and Vesper blasted the council net with an image of the dark wing's IFF void, their clipped coils, their lack of broadcast doctrine. Rourke overlaid the council's own rules next to the void. On the convoy band, a grocer with a shaky voice said, Are those yours? And in the council channel, a captain asked the same question, but with more despair. Thane's reply came with flint in it. They are not mine, he said. Stand down, unknowns. The unknowns did not stand down. Credited kill yields bonus cycles, a narrow voice said on a private line that Imani turned into a public one. We tally by our own light. Prefect Mara said softly, the softness of a scalpel. This is your doctrines, child. Hold up the mirror, then step away. The dark wing fired one shot before Imani's souring bit again and flung their aim wild. The shot kissed the far lip of the corridor and tore a ribbon of dust into glass for a second. The convoy tail shivered. On the council band, a civilian from a hab on the far rim, the one that had been watching this drama like a weather report, said, choked, "You promised mercy if we obeyed." "What is this?" "We did promise," Thane said, "and if a doctrine could have a voice break his did. We will keep our own rule." To his captains, he said, "Target the unknowns. Disable. Do not destroy. We will account for this." A vacuum of silence followed, and then the council fired at the dark wing. The wing scattered like roaches when light is introduced to a kitchen. 2 ships took hits and vented plasma like a torn lung. They ran. Cost, Vesper said, showing numbers that felt like sweat. "We can get the convoy through if we spend our heat like coin now. We'll scorch our own coats. Minor burns. Some equipment will die and need an hour to cool before it forgives us. We pay," Mara said. "We carry that bill, and we let everyone see us do it. Pay openly so they know what it takes." The fleet flared again, radiators blooming into redder fruit. Crew on spine decks pulled gloves on over gloves. Someone on attestation sang a filthy song to keep rhythm while ratcheting a panel that had chosen the worst time to be stubborn. On the Mercy's wake, Nurse Hollis dunked her burned forearm in a basin of cool and hissed like a cat, then laughed at herself and patted the kettle. "Now we match," she told it fond. Imani's voice was a thread through heat. "We can hold the web at half strength through the final run, but the noise will rise. Their captains will begin to trust their eyes again." "Good," Mara said, surprising herself. "Let them trust their eyes. We've given them something worth seeing." Rourke's hands found the last set of vector trims. "Admiral," he said, very soft, as if speaking to a child sleeping on a couch one does not want to wake. "We're almost there. Open, then hold, then name the cost without shame." The convoy's nose kissed the far edge of the siege ring and slid through. Council captains watched and did not fire. Prefect Thane, forced to choose between doctrine and the image of his own rule gone feral, chose to look at the feral part and call it wrong. It was not enough. But it was a crack that let air in. Mara kept her hands light on the rail. Sweat beaded at her temples and cooled as the radiators furled a notch. Vesper's voice dropped into the lower register reserved for relief. "We are through, not all the way, but over the hump. We kept the largest promises." "Not all," Mara said, thinking of burns and stuck panels and a coil that would not sing right for a week. "But enough. Count enough when perfection would cost too much." Rourke angled his chin. "Prefect Thane," he said, not on a broadcast, but directly. "When this is logged, your public will see your doctrine alongside the unknown's tally. They will compare. They will ask which teacher they had." "You have engineered a cruel lesson," Thane said, exhausted now. "I will be made to look heartless next to your theatrics." "Do not look at me," Mara said. "Look at the people in your care. If they ask you to count differently, listen. That is the only mercy that holds." Admiral Thane began, then stopped, as if the word were a weight he did not want to drop. "We will review." "Good," Mara said. "So will we. Steady your hand even when the room starts to cheer." They weren't done. The convoy still had to clear the last ridge without a new wing deciding to make a point. But the worst was behind. Heat maps cooled like bruises fading. The mirror web fluttered down in pieces, spent like confetti after a parade that had not been planned as celebration, but had become one anyway, in the small human way people celebrate breath. In the grocer's tiny shop, someone set 2 apples on the counter and smiled at the absurdity of apples in space, and then bought one and passed it to a child with the slow gravity of a sacrament. In the hospital barge, Nurse Hollis checked a pulse and found it strong enough to risk hope. In the tug, the captain kissed her teeth, a sailor's ward against hubris, and said, "You're a good kettle," and the kettle being a kettle held water. "Hold the mirror, keep the ledger, open the door." Rourke checked drift on the tail end of the convoy and wiped his thumb on his sleeve as if to erase grease that wasn't there. The deck under Mara's boots thrummed like a throat clearing itself before speech. Vesper lowered life support fans a fraction, and the air grew still enough that everyone heard the thin whine of coils cooling. The siege ring's lights steadied into watchfulness instead of threat, which was its own kind of pressure. "We're not clear," Mara said softly. "We're only not dead in their way. Hold steady until the lesson takes root." Imani stood in a cool island of blue readouts, fingers hovering. "Public bands are crowded," she said. "Civilians are talking to each other in the open. They're asking the council if the deadline still applies to those who've already crossed. They're asking who gets counted twice." "They're not questions for us," Rourke murmured. "But we can make sure nobody erases the answers." Vesper brought up a faint heat shimmer across the forward hollow. "Prefect Thane is speaking with an internal auditor," she said. "They intend to publish a sanitized version of events. The word regrettable appears 9 times. Regret is a tool with dull edges," Mara said. Imani saved the raw. "We may need to mirror it. Set the tally before someone moves the columns." The convoy's midline flexed as ships adjusted vector around a slow debris swirl. In the hospital barge's third bay, Nurse Etta Hollis retied a gauze with careful fingers and sniffed at the air. It had the bitter sweetness of heat that had outlived its purpose. A child coughed once and then slept. The old man lifted his kettle and listened to the ghost of a ring at the rim. "You ever think metal has memory?" he asked. Hollis smiled with half her mouth. "If it does, I hope it remembers when we did it right." On a rimhab called Wren Arch, a school teacher named Lesh pinned a paper list to the wall with 2 magnets and tapped each name with a stern fondness. The kids sat with enviable stillness, hands folded over emergency masks. A vent clacked cough soft. "If we need to move," he told them, "we move together. We count with our feet. We don't lose anyone to the space between. Open the room and invite them to count themselves in." "New contacts," Vesper said. The voice warmed 1 degree, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder to get attention without hurry. Not a wing. Something administrative. "The council has lit their auditor beacon." Rourke frowned. "Their what?" "The auditor beacon is a broadcast node that emits summary doctrine compliance in real time," Vesper said. "It tallies adherence and deviation. Publicly. It makes law feel like light." Imani's eyebrows arched. "They're going to use it to say they kept mercy by the schedule. They'll show their own numbers and call that truth." "Truth isn't a number unless someone is willing to carry it," Mara said. "We'll make the beacon show the weight. Turn their proof into a question," Admiral Thane said on a clean, steady channel that smelled of policy and polished floors. "You have forced an ugly event into beauty. We will release the ledger of this action and let our people judge. You have nothing to fear from transparency." "Transparency is a window," Mara replied. "If you never open it, it's a mirror for you alone." "We are not your students," Thane said. "Everyone is someone's student," Mara said and cut the line. "Teach anyone who leans toward listening." The plan formed between the heartbeat of a pump and the sigh of a radiator furling a finger. Vesper put an outline into the bridge air like a rumor made of lines. "We can throw a geometry around the auditor beacon," she said. If we place mirrors at the edges of their phalanx and strobe the beacon at a signal they can't suppress without admitting suppression, their guns will triangulate on their own light whenever they prepare to fire. Rourke whistled under his breath. Turn their open corridor into a hollow around their mouth. If they keep their schedule, they bracket their own honesty. Mirror lattice at triple density, Imani said. Noise will spike. Our people will need to trust our voice over their eyes. They already do, Mara said. But we do not ask for blind faith. We narrate. We show our work. Narrate the math so it feels like care. Before the throw, the crew vignette fell into place like a coin into a hand. On the Corvette, Attestation Crew Chief Del Rios leaned into a maintenance crawl and pulled a cable with both hands until it yielded a centimeter that felt like a mull. The cable smelled like hot dust and old insulation. When we take heat, she told the kid behind her, you don't think about heat. You think about steps. Clip, confirm, close. Then you breathe after. The kid nodded, consecrating each verb like a prayer. If I forget the steps, he asked. You say them out loud, she said, and I'll say them with you, on gray circlet. Petty Officer Marao brushed the wardroom table with a rag and made a circle on the surface free of grit. Then another like planting small gardens. I want this ready, she told the mechanic. We feed whoever comes aboard. We make room even if there is no room. Where does it go? He asked, gesturing at the rest of the mess. It goes into the ledger, she said simply. So someone remembers it mattered. Write quiet kindness where the big numbers cannot. The mirror lattice throw this time was not gentle. Foils flicked out like scales from a hand that had been waiting to unclench. Vesper threaded phase noise through the hulls like ribbon through hair. The auditor beacon shone clean and proud, unbribed by context. They'll try to change the strobe. Imani said, hands quick. If they do it silently, we show the silence. Broadcast our inputs to the public band, Mara said. As we press keys, as we decide. No edits, full rate. We give our people the way we learn. Doing so reveals our weaknesses, Vesper warned, not with reluctance, but with the math of someone who does not lie even to be kind. We teach first, Mara said. If our enemies learn good, then they can choose better. Show your hands so trust has fingers to hold. The beacon's first strobe passed the ring. Council guns took a reflex aim, as if they had to remind themselves how to threaten without thinking. The geometry Vesper folded around the beacon caught the aim cones and reflected them back in ghost lines tapered to the beacon's skin. On every scope in the corridor, the image was inescapable. To fire on a schedule now meant drawing crosshairs over the very light that claimed to be mercy. Prefect, a council captain, said on the leak, Imani kept open like a wound being irrigated. If we adhere in public, we desecrate the beacon in public. We hold the doctrine, Thane said, but his voice had an impact scar in it. Mara keyed open. This is your chance to learn in view of those you lead, she said. Say pause on a public channel, not quietly to your own. Out loud where the children can hear. Call the lesson by its name. Rourke cut thrust 1% to keep the convoy inside a shadow of a shadow. He smelled metallic tang where someone in Vent 6 had nicked a knuckle on a panel and wiped it on the return screen. We can ride this for 4 minutes before the heat curve demands we lower radiators and pulse again, he said. Our spine decks are sweat wet. Crew are fine. But morale feels questions. Give them answers, Mara said. He nodded and opened ship-wide. You are doing the impossible very well, he said, dry and gentle. Drink water. Breathe on the 4 count. Repeat the steps out loud. Clip, confirm, close. We stay human by repeating decent habits under pressure. The beacon flickered. It was nothing and it was everything. On the public band, Prefect Thane said a single word that sounded like a man stepping away from a cliff he had built himself and had defended with excellent murderous reasons. Pause. Capture that, Imani whispered near Reverent. Save it in 12 places, and seed it to caches we don't control. It's already seeded, Vesper said. I chose for us a second ago in case we hesitated. Mara felt at once the shock of having been carried and the rightness of it. Thank you, she said not to a machine but to her partner. Count the moments you trust each other out loud. Thane continued, breath like sand. We will refrain from scheduled escalation while civilians clear the corridor. Unknown actors are disavowed. Auditors will review the ledger. Unknown actors, Rourke said, making a face. But he hit the part that matters. He framed his retreat as adherence, Imani said. He had to, but the word pause was public. That will grow consequences the way warmth grows fruit. The fleet pulsed radiators inward. The air cooled a notch. On the attestation, Del Rios shook out her hands and pressed her palms to the deck grate to feel the hum change. On Ren Arch, Teacher Lesh let the kids take a sip of water. On Mercy's wake, Hollis told the boy. They said pause, and the boy said, "Does that mean we can count slower?" Hollis laughed until her burn stung, and then laughed anyway. Stop when you must, so that going means something. They had one more ridge to cross, before the corridor widened into the steady tail of safe space. The unknown contractors, stung and not dead, flashed back on a long loop. They'll try to tag a straggler, Vesper said. A small one. A ship with an old radiator that looks like a soft target. The tug, Rourke said, already moving. She's the obvious prayer. The tug's captain was not on any official list of saints. She had opinions about saints and praying. But she knew ropes and the way momentum pretends it can be bargained with. Admiral, she said, you say it. I'll break any bad habit you name. Run wide, Mara said. Make your weakness into bait. We'll take the bite. Was hoping you'd say that the captain said and throttled like a confession that felt good to get out. Turn their hunt into your hook. The civilian vignette before the bite came from a quieter ship. On Pollock's gate, Sarah chalked a second line under the first and told the youngest to stand in the narrow between. It's where we keep promises, she said. Not the big ones, the ones with elbows. A rattle in the duct overhead made staccato like rain against foil. The boy asked, "What if I step out?" Sarah looked at him as if he had offered her a gift of undeserved honesty. "Then I step where you go," she said. "We don't lose anyone to the space between." Imani's console hummed with the souring pattern she had saved for a second time. "Unknown coils will hiccup when they hit the tug," she said. "It's a cough, not a choke. We have a window the size of a heartbeat." "A heartbeat is a bridge," Mara said. Rourke aligned the attestation as a shield. "We'll take the graze and show the bruise. Take a small hurt to prove a big point." The unknowns came in low and mean, pretending to be a bad idea carried by habit. Imani's sour hit made their aim slip like a foot on wet tile. Their first shot scored across attestation's forward plates and skinned paint like a careless shave. A seam popped on deck 2. Alarms didn't scream. They complained, which felt more honest. Del Rios was already moving. "Clip," she said, and the kid answered, "Clip." "Confirm," she said, and he echoed, "Confirm." "Close," she said, and he pressed a patch with both hands and closed a hole no wider than a ring, but big enough to matter if given time. The patch smelled like fresh sealant lemon sharp over metal. Report, Vesper said. No casualties. One superficial burn on Chief Del Rios's knuckle. She swore and then kissed her glove. Log both, Mara said. This is the ledger we carry. Log the sweat so the blood stays scarce. The tug ran wide, and the unknowns followed angry, with a kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. Vesper's map, no longer polite, showed a pinch point in the debris field, where a ring of old satellite shells drifted like a crown, dropped and forgotten. There, she said. A cradle of junk. We thread the tug through it. The unknowns will follow. We strobe their coils with our beacon geometry. The council will see, and so will their auditors. If we miss thread, we scrape, Rourke said. If we scrape, we own it, Mara said. We name it. We do not pretend we did not lose paint. Own the scratches before anyone else claims them. The tug slipped into the cradle. The unknowns entered arrogant and found their beams painting their own coils in reflected geometry. They fired anyway, because habit wears courage's clothes. 2 shots scorched back along their own throats and cooked control panes to the smell of baked dust and fat wire. Laughter sounded on the public band, not cruel, just relieved. Someone, maybe the grocer, maybe a half-asleep kid, clapped twice. On the council band, a young analyst said, clearly forgetting he was not supposed to sound like a person while working numbers, "Prefect, if we keep the beacon hot here, any shot within this region reads as self-harm. It makes doctrine look not merciful." Then we learn, Thane said, and there was no sand on his words for a moment. We will not fire in that region. Unknowns are disavowed as before. Say it publicly, Mara said. Make the region a sanctuary in your words. Sanctuary, Thane said, and this time he did not whisper. Name the safe places where everyone can hear. They cleared the cradle. The convoy lengthened into an orderly line that would look like grace when later told by those who needed to believe in graceful endings. Vesper dimmed radiator output by degrees that felt like someone laying a cool cloth on a fevered brow. Rourke encoded a thank you for the tug's captain into a file that would display on her kettle when next she polished it, because he had learned that gratitude sticks better when attached to objects. Imani checked the load on the mirror foils and grimaced. Lattice elements are spent, she said. We can throw one more choir if pressed, but it will sound like a voice after a long night. We won't ask it to sing alone, Mara said. We'll sing with it. If the instrument is tired, adjust the song. They approached the head of safe space. The blockade lights dimmed a notch. The auditor beacon continued to shine, but now the light meant something different to those who watched. On the public band, messages braided into a rope. We saw you pause, a civilian wrote. We saved lives, a captain answered, surprising himself with the plural. We demand review, an auditor posted on the ledger feed. We will appear, Thane said. Vesper, Mara said, feeling the end of the work, like the slackening of a rope one has been pulling for hours. Send the convoy to the escorting ships. Rotate the hot decks. Get air moving. Give me a breakpoint where I can look for myself. Breakpoint set, Vesper said. And Admiral, your voice has been steady enough that I would like to record its waveform as a calibration reference. Mara laughed, the tired kind that doesn't spill. You already did, correct, Vesper said. But asking changes the carrying. Say thank you, even if the math didn't require it. The final civilian vignette before the crossing of the line into true quiet came from Ren Arch. Teacher Lesh stood the kids and had them touch the list with 2 fingers each. Your names are not numbers, he said. They are stories. Today they got longer. A vent sighed like a relieved chest. A little girl asked, Do we still count? He nodded. We count so we know where we are, not so we know what we're worth. Mara leaned her forehead against the cool of the forward rail and smelled ship metal oil ozone ghost, the clean end of fear. The fleet crew ate the last of the ration bars and told each other jokes that weren't funny but belonged anyway. There was a bruise on attestation's paint, a patch on a seam, a burn on a nurse's forearm, a sore knuckle on a chief's hand, a kettle that remembered a pause. Close gently so the next opening is easier, Admiral Thane said, quieter. My people will demand a review board. They will ask if our clocks were ever mercy. They will ask about unknowns and bonuses. They will ask why we called adherence care even when fear did our work for us. I will have to answer. You will, Mara said, and allowed gentleness into her voice without softening it to apology. Say this, your doctrine counted efficiency. You forgot to carry the fear your clocks created. You can learn. The first word you said that matters here was pause. The second will be rescind. Rescind is not a word our law likes, Thane said. Then get a new law, Mara said. Some words are hard, because they unlock heavy doors. He took a breath that sounded like someone lifting an old lid. We will return to the council with a resolution. The ultimatum schedule is prohibited in civilian corridors. Deviation is not a sin when the deviation spares lives. Unknown contractor bounties are abolished. We will count costs in public. Put it on your ledger, Mara said. Post it like a marriage license. Make it a promise you're embarrassed to break, Admiral Thane said. And in that word, there was a respect that didn't ask permission to exist. We will. Post your policy where the people who pay can see it. Vesper closed the fleet ranks around the convoy like a blanket being shaken into place before sleep. Rourke ran hands over his console as if patting a dog who had behaved bravely. Imani let the web fall in ribbons, catching a scrap of foil and rubbing it between finger and thumb. It left a faint metallic glitter. Souvenir, she said. We'll frame it on the wardroom wall. Title: When a Mirror Saved a Schedule from Itself. Make the caption a ledger entry, Mara said. Numbers and a line about a kettle. We are not a sentimental outfit, Rourke said, smiling, despite the obvious. We are when it keeps us honest, Mara said. Let the record hold laughter next to loss. They crossed the last invisible ridge. The air in the ships didn't change. The stars didn't recompose themselves. And yet the pressure eased the way a headache eases when you realize you have been clenching your jaw for an hour. In the tug, the captain sat on a crate and rested her head against a bulkhead with tin tenderness. On Mercy's wake, Hollis finally drank water that wasn't for someone else and tasted nothing and everything. On Renarch Teacher, Lesh allowed the kids to talk at once and be loud, because loudness now was a celebration, not a waste of air. Vesper dimmed the bridge surlights to a kinder hue. Our coolant pumps want a nap, she said. I will let them dream for 12 minutes. They earned it, Mara said. Let your machines rest when they have been good. A small ceremony formed itself without anyone planning it. Rourke placed the spent foil scrap in the center of a mess table. Del Rios put her patched glove next to it. Hollis sent a photo of her burn with the caption, "Worth it." The tug's captain forwarded a short clip of her kettle singing as water settled. Imani added the audio of the word pause from the public band. Vesper wrapped it all into a single file labeled simply with the date and the word carried. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, Vesper said softly, not to the log, but to Mara. Never by callers. Stamp that, Mara said. In the shared archive and the public one. Stamp the lore where anyone can read it. The ledger rolled in across the council's public feed minutes later. The language had the dry hunger of law learning to be better. Effective immediately, it read, Ultimatum clocks are prohibited in corridors with registered civilian presence. Doctrine modified. Sanctions severed against pause declarations made in good faith. Contractor bounty structures rescinded. Violations recorded by the auditor beacon and subject to citizen review, Saved Imani said. Mirrored. Printed to the low-tech board on Ren Arch because Teacher Lesh asked for a paper copy for the wall. Rourke laughed and rubbed eyes that felt like sand. A paper law in space. I'll breathe easier when I see thumbprints on it. Give it an hour, Mara said. We make things real when hands touch them. The aftermath tasted like sleep not yet earned. There were reports to file coils, to tune burns, to salve with creams that smelled like sterile flowers. Someone found time to make coffee, and it smelled like proof that bitterness can be kind when held in a cup. Imani sent the mirror lattice code to appear on another fleet with the subject line, Teach Not Blind, and a winking star emoji that would have made her blush last year. Rourke drifted to the forward rail and stood beside Mara without posture. You know they'll pretend this was always policy, he said. Within a week. Let them, Mara said. If it sticks, I don't mind borrowed virtue. You'll be invited to testify, he said. I'll bring the kettle clip, she said. Bring small objects to big rooms. Vesper faded the countdown from the corner of every screen. It left a pale afterimage like a ghost of pressure. Admiral, she said, I have been modeling a way to set the next corridor standard before someone tries to fill this vacuum with a new certainty. A Teach First channel that fleets can broadcast on entry. Teach First, Mara repeated, liking the way it tasted. What does it carry? Procedures. A ledger template. A promise to pause where fear spikes. A song, maybe. People like songs. They do, Mara said. We will sing in prose and count in kindness. Draft it. She touched the rail again. It was cool and solid and her friend. She spoke not to anyone specific, and not to everyone, but to the ship and the crew and the world that had just learned a new word for mercy. I once thought restraint meant holding your breath forever, she said, half smile in it. It means holding it until there's air for more than you. Breathe and teach in the same motion. The fleet dispersed escorts like crumbs on a path home. The convoy peeled away in twos and threes, each ship a story continuing past the page. The tug blinked thanks in the code of a dozen ports. Mercy's wake carried the boy and the old man and Nurse Hollis toward a station where the kettle would sit on a shelf and be funny to anyone who didn't know. Pollux Gate's chalk lines smudged under elbows that no longer had to hover. Wren Arch hung the printed law. Thumbprints bloomed across it like flowers in a place that had forgotten spring. Mara's last duty was the first one always set the tone. She opened the fleet channel. I am proud of the way we counted today, she said. I am proud we carried what we named. We fought less than we were tempted to and more than we wanted to. We showed our work and invited our enemy to show theirs. They did. They will keep doing it if pressed by hands that do not tire of holding doors open. She let the channel rest. The bridge lights cooled toward evening that didn't exist in space. Vesper lowered the hum of life support until it was a purr. A single crisp image settled across the forward hollow blockade lights dimmed to maintenance. The mirror arrays cooling to pewter, the public tally on the auditor beacon updating with a new line ultimatum clocks prohibited and a small icon in the corner of a kettle with a musical note. We learned today, Mara said, letting the words be her closing wheel, small and round. Counting is not cruel if you carry it. Mercy means opening more doors, not choosing a prettier lock. We owe the next corridor a song, a ledger, and a mirror. And if we must fight, we will fight with teeth that bite as little as we can. Teach first, fight if forced, then teach them why it hurt. We will keep opening doors faster than they can draw deadlines.